Good morning. Welcome to Art Pastor Live. I'm Steve Thomason. I am a visual artist. I am a pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and I'm a professor of spiritual formation and discipleship at Luther Seminary. And every Thursday, I go live for 45 minutes to an hour so that I can hang out with you so that we together can explore spirituality and scripture through visual art and creativity. I just love doing this kind of work, and I love sharing it with you live because live is, kind of exciting, and anything can happen, and things could make big noises in the rest of my house that I don't even know about. So here we are. We're live, and I'm so glad you're with me today. This whole month of July, I'm working with this theme called the art of ordinary time. And I want to explore how we can experience God through just connecting with. Sorry, somebody's in the other part of my room right now making some noise. So um, I want to explore how we can experience God through experiencing nature. And for me, as a visual artist, one of the things that I love to do is to go out into nature and to draw landscapes, to draw really anything that I see. And so today, what I want to do is focus in on trees in particular. I just love drawing trees. And so I titled this live stream today, Listening to the Trees. So, as is my practice each week, I'm going to look at the idea first. We're going to look at some scripture. We're going to look at how trees play in as a metaphor throughout scripture. And then I'm going to spend the bulk of our time. Well, the second thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you, take you on a tour, a guided tour of some artwork where I have just drawn trees. I've got so many trees in my sketchbook. I want to share them with you. And then I'll put a link where you can look through those later in your own time. And then I'm going to create a piece of art live on my iPad, and it's what I'm going to call a tree mandala. And so a mandala is it's actually a Zen form of art, where a true mandala is where Buddhist priests would make sand art in these circular patterns, and they would take hours, days, sometimes even weeks to create, and then at the end they would destroy them. And it's this practice of not holding on to things. Um, that's not what I'm going to do today, but I just love the circular pattern and the mindfulness, the contemplative nature of creating a mandala. So maybe you've seen me doing Zentangles in the past. This is like a different way of doing contemplative sketching. So anyway, you'll see it's going to be super fun. And so if you're with me live, just want you to know that this is interactive. It's one of the reasons I go live. And so if you just give a shout out in the chat, let me know that you're there. If you have any questions or any comments throughout this stream, please put it in the chat and I will respond. So here we go. We're going to have some fun. The first thing that I want to do is take you to my website. If you go to artpastor.com, um, that's where I'm at. And I have this page called Images of the Vine and the Branches. And this is a collection that I put together of different images that I've created as I have been um, visually contemplating different portions of scripture. And so I thought this would be a good place to start because in the very beginning, the very first book of the Bible, Genesis, in the creation story, in the second creation story in Genesis chapter 2, it talks about how God created the Adam, which is the Hebrew word for human. God created the Adam and placed the Adam in the garden of delight. That's what Eden means. So, the garden of delight. And in the center of this garden, there were two trees. So, the whole creation story begins with trees. You have the tree of life, Rich Nelson. I'm Reverend Rich Nelson, the Assistant Director of Spiritual Formation on the Preaching Congregations Initiative at VTS. I'm coaching preachers on being more creative through it. Hey, Rich, thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate you shouting out. And if you have any questions as we're going through this, just let me know. We're going to have so much fun today. So, yeah, this image comes from my illustration of Genesis chapters 1 and 2. So if you click on that, it goes to cartoonistbible.com/Genesis, and you can see this. I illustrated the creation stories as graphic novels. But this panel, there's two trees, right? There's the tree of life, and there's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And I just think it's interesting that the Hebrew creation stories begin with trees, and that trees are life. And so there's so much we can learn from trees. And if you go down now, another place where a tree plays an important image is in Psalm 1 through 3, where the psalmist says, the very first psalm begins talking about how blessed is the person who meditates on the Torah of God. That person is like a tree that is planted by streams of living water. And so, again, this image of tree and of a fruit bearing tree is really key to our understanding of our relationship with God. And so I just think that's really cool. And then if you keep going through the Hebrew scripture, another place that a tree and specifically a vine metaphor is used is that Israel itself is called a vine, that God has placed Israel in the world like a vineyard. And the purpose of a vineyard is to produce grapes. And the fruit of the fruit of the vine is the grape. And the grape is both food. See, here's the thing about fruit bearing trees is that they they do multiple things. One is the fruit is the seed itself. And so when the fruit is produced and the fruit drops to the ground, it multiplies the tree or the vine. The other thing about the fruit itself is the fruit can be eaten, and that feeds non trees. So all creatures can come and benefit from the fruit of this vine. And then you can take the grapes and any fruit and squeeze it, and you get the juice from the fruit, and you can make juice, and then you can ferment it, and you can make beautiful wine that brings joy and happiness to the world. And that was the purpose of Israel. But the imagery throughout many of the prophets, Isaiah in particular, talks about how the fruit, the wine, the grapes of Israel were wild grapes or bitter grapes, and they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. So the horrible metaphor is that Assyria comes in like an axe and cuts down the vine, but it doesn't destroy the vine. It prunes the vine back so dramatically that it can restart. And so then you have this other image of the shoot. There's a new branch that comes out of the stump, and this new branch is the shoot of Jesse. And of course, as disciples of Jesus, we connect Jesus to this prophecy. And so, which brings me to Jesus in John chapter 15 talks about himself as that vine, and that his disciples are branches in the vine. So you have this whole image. This is an image I did a long time ago, talking about the upper room discourse in the Last Supper. And then if you come down here, this is my most recent image from A Cartoonist Guide to John that I just did a couple of years ago, where Jesus, I kind of made this vine look more tree-like. So what I'm trying to do right now is just to ground, to be rooted, if you will, pun intended, with our metaphor as to why I love trees so much, because it really is deeply a biblical imagery. And my whole thing is exploring spirituality and scripture through visual art and creativity. So I have drawn about vines and trees from a scriptural perspective quite a bit in my life. But there there are two books of Revelation. So next week, hopefully, if everything works out, I'm going to have an interview with Drew from the Science and Religion uh, ministry. I'll tell you more about that later. But we're going to talk about how creation itself, as St. Augustine said, and so many others have said, that creation itself is a book of Revelation. Like we can actually know about God and experience God through creation, through nature, and in the modern world, that's part of the beauty of science. Is science is simply the observation of nature. And so, let me just say this about science and art, right? Remember, way back in my first live stream a few weeks ago, I talked about how the definition of the word art is skill. And science is actually a method of observation. And for me, drawing nature in plein air, which means out and open in real life, is the discipline of observing. Seeing is drawing is seeing. Remember, I said this last week, drawing is seeing is understanding, and understanding is the beginning of wisdom. Well, that's what science is too. Science is simply observing creation. And we can learn about God by observing creation well. And so, what I want to do, the second thing I want to do, um, real quick, if you want to really geek out about trees, there is a website called the Marginalian. Used to be called Brain Pickings. It's produced by Maria Popova, and she's brilliant. And she has done a lot of work with trees. And so you can just go to themarginalian.org. And these are all the different posts that she's done that are tagged about trees. But I don't want to get distracted by all the cool philosophy because I want to dive into the art. So, what I want to do right now is simply just geek out over my sketchbook and portfolio around trees. So, what I did this week is I went through a bunch of my artwork and I found all the places that I have drawn trees. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. Just want to share them with you because art should be shared. This is just a Google Photos album that I put together. So I'll put a link to this album in a post for this live stream when we're done. And so this is a tree that was in my backyard. And unfortunately, so I moved into this house in 2017 and I had this big old ornamental crabapple tree, and it was really beautiful. It was big, it was super messy, but it died, and we were so sad. So I have a few drawings of it. Um, this is another image of it. But these are just sketchbooks. Like I'll just take my sketchbook and a pen and go out and draw trees because they're just so amazing. When you just take the time to look at all the intricacies of they just grow in such an organic, unpredictable way, and yet there's so much beauty. So here's that big ornamental tree that's right next to my deck. There's my hammock in the background. And that tree's not there anymore. So one of the things about creating these journals is it creates a record. You know, it's a photo album. This is pine tree in my backyard that I have a hammock strapped to. I spend a lot of time hanging in between these two pine trees. This is the other pine tree from a different angle. So I'm actually in the hammock, and this is the strap. But I just love trying to capture all of the details of the bark and the branches that have been pruned. And yeah, this is a charcoal drawing of a tree um, that it was in my sister-in-law's backyard in Denver, Colorado. I know that because I recognize this wind chime that's hanging from that tree. It's a beautiful tree. This is also in her backyard. Sometimes I like to take pictures with the actual utensil that I use to draw the tree. So this is an ebony pencil by Design. It's a graphite pencil. This is an oil painting that I did in plein air. This is the North Platte River that flows through Pine, Colorado, up in the mountains, and it's right near another sister-in-law's house. And so, just a quick oil painting trying to capture that pine tree growing up there. Now, here's a totally different feel, but if you've been around my website at all, you know that this is um, a core image for me. This is actually part of my mission statement. The reason I do what I do is because I want all of us to grow deeper in the love of God. And you can see the image there is the fruit bearing tree. And so trees grow in two ways. They they grow wide canopies that provide shade and shelter and food and seeds for themselves and for other creatures. But they also, in order to grow a wide canopy, they have to grow deep roots. And so a tree is as big below the ground as it is above the ground. And that's one of the many, many things I love about trees and the metaphor. So if you want to do good in the world and have a wide reach, you also have to do the inner work of growing deeper in your relationship with God, in the love of God. And so that's part of my metaphor of trees for spirituality. Um, Here's a tree in a park. This is a charcoal drawing. This is at Camp Wapo up in Amory, Wisconsin, which I love to hang out there a lot. This is another group of trees, again at Camp Wapo. You can see that cross in the background. This is the beachfront worship area on the lake. And so you can see three layers. You've got the far background, which is just lines, and then you come into all the detail of this tree, and tried to emphasize the black silhouette of this thin tree trunk in the middle. This is an oil painting in plein air in a farm just near Camp Wapo. My friend Paul Oman, shout out to Paul Oman, who is also an ELCA pastor and a brilliant artist. He and I will go out plein air painting together. So I did this as a little 11 by 14 canvas in oil, capturing those trees and barns and the afternoon light. Here's a pen and ink drawing up at Pacham in Terrace, which is up in Isanti, Minnesota, where I often do hermitages. And actually, next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a hermitage up there. If you've never done a hermitage, I highly recommend it. And so, what I did with this one is it's pen and ink with Copic markers for the gray tones, and then a white ballpoint pen to do highlights on toned paper. And this was during my hermitage. It's a way of contemplating the nature around me. And again, same spot, the trees across the lake up in Pachman Terrace. Really cool. This is a plein air painting that I did off the deck of my sister-in-law's house in Pine, Colorado. You imagine seeing this view every morning? Yeah. But the conifer forests up there are just breathtaking. This is oil. This is actually an illustration that I did on my iPad, which I'm going to be demonstrating my iPad in just a minute. This illustration was created, again, painted in my iPad in Procreate, but from a photograph that I took near my sister-in-law's house in Pine, Colorado. This is called Cathedral Rock, and it's just a beautiful place. But just looking at how the conifers, when you get them all together, they're just so majestic. Again, this is a gouache painting plein air of the tree in my backyard. This is that same tree, and that is now gone. So I have a colorful memory of it. Quick gouache sketch. This is a gouache sketch of this is actually just from a photograph that I found of beautiful fall colors of the trees. One of the things I love about trees is the way they arch over things. And so they frame this river so beautifully. And trees turn color up here in the Midwest. The deciduous trees, you can track the seasons by the trees. So the trees know when it's time to sleep, when it's time to wake up, and they go through these phases. Now, this is an interesting tree because it's actually inside the Mall of America in Nickelodeon Universe. So a few years ago, I took a plein air day in the middle of winter. I rode the bus to the mall and spent the day with my plein air kit. And this was a tree in the middle of a human construct. Nature's still there. Beautiful. This is one of my favorite point. This is an oil painting. This is a studio painting, so it's a lot more detailed. But this is also of Camp Wapo. And I just love the way that this one tree, even though this tree is dead, which is why its bark is lighter, it just stands there as like almost like a sentinel watching over all of the other trees and watching over this staircase. I call this painting the Light of Wapo. It's one of my favorite paintings. Now, this is a painting I did on my iPad, which is more of an abstract symbolic painting, as I had just come from a conference where for the first time I ever experienced the blanket exercise of indigenous tribes of North America. If you've never done that before, I highly recommend it. And I was really struck by a sense of place. And one of the things that I learned from trees is, trees are deeply rooted in place. Trees don't move around unless you're an ant from the Lord of the Rings. Shout out to the ants, right? But the wisdom of trees is that they're rooted in one place and they know a place and the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun and the moon and the seasons and in Guatemala, I've strong ties to Guatemala. The national tree in Guatemala is this gigantic tree that sometimes they're over 200 feet tall. And the ancient Guatemalans believed that these were the tree of the gods, that they were actually the bridge because the top of these trees reach up to the heavens. And then the bottom of the trees are deeply rooted in the ground and they connect us to the gods. And so I think there's a lot to be learned about that. Oh, somehow I just zoomed in here. Sorry about that. I don't want to zoom in. Oh, there we go. I fixed it. All right. And here's another symbolic painting. I did this in my on my iPad, and I call this the spirit of Earth. And again, a lot of indigenous cultures um, have different mythology around trees as living creatures. Well, trees are living creatures, as spirits, as because trees provide shelter. Trees, the tree of life, again, back in the Genesis story, is really a powerful metaphor. So I just wanted to paint this image. It's purely from my imagination, of course, and I really love this painting. You can actually buy this one as a print if you want. Let me know if you want to find out how to do that. Here's a quick gouache sketch from my sketchbook, again, near my sister-in-law. The aspen up in the Colorado Rockies are just so beautiful. And I love how every once in a while, one of the aspen trunks just does this little jig. And I'll show you my favorite one of those in just a second. But again, here's an example of just open up my sketchbook and there's a bunch of trees and you just take time to notice them and draw their shapes with a pen and ink. Here's another dancing aspen in my sketchbook. Here it is. This one is my favorite. This is a gouache sketch. The actual size of this is only 5 inches by 7 inches. And this is actually just in a little gully near the road that leads to my sister-in-law's house. And I looked down into the shadows of this gully, and there it was, these three aspen branches, two of them just nice and straight, and then one just doing this wild dance. So I call it dancing in the dark. And I just love this one. And I just wonder, like, what made this particular tree move in this direction? And the movement takes so much time, years and years to grow a tree. This is an oil painting of a path in a park near my house, and I just love the way this is early spring as the canopy is starting to unfold in the bright greens of spring. It's just a beautiful shot. And then I think this is maybe my last one, but this was actually a commissioned oil piece where someone commissioned me to do this. It's from a photograph that they gave me, but I just love the way the light shines through the trees and the dappled light, the dappled color. It's just such a majestic shot, and it was really fun in oil paint to figure out how to make this glow like this through the canopy. Oh, that wasn't my last one. Now this one I drew last year in early spring, April 13th. It was a warm April day, and the leaves had not yet started coming out on the trees. And this is right in front of Bachman Hall on Luther Seminary's campus. This is right outside of my office. I love this tree. These huge oak trees are just covering the front lawn. And just the way I love oaks because they're so gnarled and the way they just turn around, it's just amazing. This is a pine tree right outside of Chapman University in Orange, California. I was at a conference there with Solarize, and we were on a break, and this tree just called to me, and I just had to sit down and draw this majestic. I mean, I can't even imagine how many years it took to grow this gnarly trunk, probably hundreds of years. This is an oil painting that was commissioned to paint last summer, and beautiful northern Minnesota forest. It's from a photograph of a friend's cabin, and I took some liberties with it and made the path just a footpath. But this is based on Minnesota forests and the pine trees that we enjoy here. And then this is in San Antonio, Texas, where we've got palm trees, and we have a whole different way of being trees because trees adapt to their climate, right, and their environment. This is a painting I did last year for my daughter. It's more about the fae, but I love the trees, and especially right here, how in this part of it you've got these moss hanging. And this image was actually inspired by my experience up in Alaska when I was visiting yet another sister-in-law who lives in Alaska, and we went on this hike. And so basically, this whole thing is based upon an actual waterfall that we experienced, and the way that the moss hangs off of the trees is just so cool. And then this is a painting I did earlier this year that was actually purchased by some friends. And this is a painting from memory when I drove through Yellowstone and saw a forest, part of the forest that had just gone through a forest fire. And so the lesson that I learned from trees in this context is that even though all of these individual trees died in the fire, um, some forests actually require intense fire heat to release their seed pods. And so there's sections of Yellowstone and forests all over the world where you will see all of these bleached out trunks like this standing, towering above a whole new forest that's maybe like 6 feet tall growing up underneath it. And so it's just, trees remind us of the cycles of life on so many different levels. This is a little tree up in, I did a retreat this year up in February at Arrowwood Resort in Minnesota. And it was cold outside, but it was warm inside. So I sat in the hallway, and this tree was right outside the window. So I was able to capture it in a gouache sketch. And it was just a contemplative practice that I invited some people to join me to do. This is a tree up in Wapo, again, in my sketchbook with pen and ink, capturing the brokenness of this tree. And this is a tree that I showed you last week. This is very recent from my time in Camp House. This is a gouache sketch of the mother tree. It's the largest white pine at Camp House up in Brimson, Minnesota. And then during that same week, I captured in a gouache sketch the roots of a tree. Again, the roots are just so gnarly, and you can just barely see the tops of the root structure peeking above the ground, and just imagining how much is underneath the ground that we can't even see. And then just this week, I did this tree meditation from my imagination, and the tree turned into a Zen tangle, and I just loved the way that turned out. And this right here is a painting I did a couple of years ago that is very large. Each of these panels is 3 foot by 4 foot. And this is Gooseberry Falls through the seasons. It was commissioned by an individual, and we dreamed up this idea together. And I love the way that this image captures the trees in all 4 seasons. So in the winter, only the pines retain their greenery, and all the deciduous trees go to sleep. And then in the spring, they wake up and the bright, beautiful flowers emerge. And then in the summer, there's just this lush mass of green foliage. And then, of course, in the fall, the chlorophyll drains out, and you see the true colors of the leaves. Did you know that's what happens in the fall? These are the actual colors of the leaves, but the chlorophyll is like the blood that's flowing through them, and that's green. And so the green overpowers their true color. And then when the chlorophyll dries up, then the true colors come out, and then the leaves die and fall to the ground, and we go back to winter. So there you go. That's the end of my tour. So now what I'm going to do is spend the rest of our time together actually creating a piece of art. So let me switch over to my iPad, and I've got music. And I'm going to turn my music down just a little bit so that it's not too loud. There, I think that's good. So what I'm going to do now is I got to move my microphone over, and I'm going to bring in my camera so that you can see my hand. And I'm just going to create a Zentangle, not a Zentangle. I'm going to create a mandala tree. So at this point, if you're still with me live, I'd love to hear any questions or comments that you have about that. Or if you're still with me live, I invite you to take out a piece of paper or whatever art equipment that you like and create a piece of art yourself that maybe there's a tree outside your house, maybe there's a tree that you can draw from your memory, or just do any kind of a sketch that will help you contemplate what we've been talking about today. So I'll talk through this a little bit, but there will probably be moments where I'm not talking, so just enjoy the music. And again, this is a contemplative practice. So let me just tell you what I'm doing. You can also, if you're a Procreate user, you might geek out on some of the fun stuff. So I'm going to do a square. I'll just do a 2048. So this is a square image. And the first thing I want to do is go to my canvas and turn on my drawing guide, because I need a grid to start this. So I'm going to edit my drawing guide and make my grid size so that I only have 4 squares. So that makes it super easy for me to locate the center. So in this Procreate app on the iPad, you can create layers. So I'm going to create a layer. I have a pen, which is, I'm going to use my gel streamlined pen to begin with, and I'm going to just use black. And a cool feature of Procreate is that you can just roughly make a circle, and if you hold it and tap, it will make a perfect circle. Then I'm going to select this layer and line it up so that it is perfectly centered in my square. So now I have a circle, because a mandala is based on a circle. All right. Now I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to duplicate it. So now I have a copy of this on a different layer and select it. And if I grab this corner and drag it down, it will keep the perfection of the circle intact. No such thing as perfection, but you know what I mean. Bring it down here. We'll have this circle, and I'll line up the circle centered, so I know that this circle is centered right on that dot. Okay, and do this a couple times, because what I'm wanting to do is create concentric circles, because that's what mandalas are based on. And there's no rules about mandalas. You can look up mandala and see all kinds of different things. So I think I'm going to do one more. I have a rough idea of what I'm going to do with this mandala. But again, part of the contemplative practice of this is being surprised at where your art goes, where the images go that you're creating. Okay, so now you see I've got these concentric circles, and these are just guides for me. So what I want to do is pinch them all together, and now they're on just one layer. So I can turn that layer on and off. Here's a pro tip for Procreate. If you take this layer and turn it into a reference layer, then all your other layers will refer to this layer. It's really cool. So I want to make a new layer, and what I want to do is I want to create concentric rings of blue tones, going from a really saturated blue on the outside to almost pure white in the middle. And since this is my reference layer, I have a new layer, but if I just drag and drop this, you'll see that it fills just that layer. But that layer is on its own. It's not actually part of the dark layer. So if I make a new layer and I choose a little bit lighter blue, I can make that layer And actually, I think I want it to be a little bit more saturated than that. Okay, that's good. If I make a new layer here and then bring my blue up like that, yeah, I think that's what I want. So fascinating. Rich Nelson. I've led others in sketching trees as a tree meditation spiritual practice. I'm learning a lot I can use. Oh, that's great, Rich. I'm so glad you're sticking with me, man. Hopefully we can meet each other. Okay. Yep. All right. So now I've got one more, and this one's going to be almost white, but I do want to fill it so that I have something to work with. So already this is pretty cool, right? So this is just a monochromatic scale, and because this is really cool too, because I may decide to not even use those black lines, and so you can see that the black lines created a white space in between. All right, so we've got that, and we can work with this. We can use this. I'm going to take these and I'm going to group them and call the group, I'm just erasing that. I'm going to call this circles, and that's going to be my baseline. And this is a group, right? So I can like hide all the circles together and then bring them back up, or I could do them individually. So they're all separate, which gives me a lot of flexibility. So now the next thing I want to do is kind of forget about my symmetry, and I want to just start drawing a tree. So I'm going to go with, I think I'm just going to do black. And this right here, this Max Hughes sketch marker, is my favorite drawing tool. So I'm going to imagine that this center line right here is the ground. So you've got what happens above the ground and what happens below the ground. And bring my now I can already tell that I actually just for the sake of composition, I want my ground line to be right here. So I'm going to bring my trunk down here, and I just want to create like a rough shape. So I'm just going to be bringing things out like that, and then I want my canopy of my tree to be like that. Okay, and so now I can just start imagining these branches coming out. And one of the things I love about trees is that they are not symmetrical. And so I'll imagine this tree I'm feeling oakish on this one. So I've been observing the oak trees on Luther Seminary's lawn, and man, those branches are just so gnarly. The way they twist and turn almost at angles. So that's what I'm going for here. So yeah. And as you can see, I'm not mapping this out. I'm trying to just go with an organic, like how a tree might randomly branch itself out over time. Which I think is just kind of exciting. Draw like that. And of course you gotta imagine that some of these branches, they're coming right at you, right? So let's just think there's this really big one that's just coming right at us, doing this way and then turning a corner going up that way. And then it's got another branch going like that. And it gets messy, right? But this tree is also going to have big masses of, let's do big masses of foliage. So the tree right outside of Bachman Hall has this, it's almost like a goiter. It's got this huge tumor sticking out the side of it. And I don't know exactly what caused it. I think some tumors on trees are caused by a trauma, like they were cut or hit or something. Some of them might be caused by a virus or an invasive species. I don't know, but they definitely create character. So here we got this tree going like that. Now this is just a sketch layer. So we got the tree on the surface coming out towards you, but then you've also got like everything that's happening down below the ground. And I want that to be just as important, because remember, if a tree is going to have a wide canopy, it has to have those deep roots, right? Okay, so that's my sketch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a layer underneath this sketch. And I've got some really cool brushes that, one of the powerful things about Procreate is that you can kind of cheat. But they've got all of these foliage brushes. So I'm going to choose a deep red, and I'm gonna put in a shadowy foliage space in the background like that. Now, if you're wondering why I'm using red when you think, like, is this a fall picture or is this, I'm going to eventually make green summery foliage, but I'm using red because the complement, like if you look up here, the complement of red on the color wheel is green. And so by using the complement of your main color as a shadow and background, you can create some really cool effects. And then this brush automatically has built into it a variation of color and opacity, and I'm still going to put some maybe some brighter red in there. So again, I'm just playing. You can see this is behind this drawing, so I haven't damaged anything. I'm just following that canopy. It's kind of cool. And then maybe I'll use my gouache brush, my favorite thin gouache marker, to put that same tone as the ground underneath, like this. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Again, I haven't forgotten about my mandala. I haven't forgotten about the circle and the symmetry, but we're going to come to that in a minute. All right, so I am on a time constraint here, so I'm going to put a new layer above that background shading layer, and this one is going to be my trunk layer. So I'm going to rename that one trunk. And I'm going to use a nice dark brown first, but I'm going to use a medium brush and just come in here and put in a solid color for my trunk. I'm actually going to turn this layer off so I can see better. So I'm just basically going to draw these branches with a solid color. And that will become important in a minute because I need to have a solid color to shade around it. Okay, let's get this guy out here. I'm going to switch to a different brush in just a second. So what I'm doing right now is just getting the big thick trunk part in. I'm going to switch to a brush that is called the Crumbrushian, and it has this nice edge to it, and it's got a really nice thick and thin, and that's what I really want on this. So I want to get the thick and thin of these branches. Notice how I don't care too much about sticking with my sketch. Actually, I'm going to make my sketch a lot less opaque so that I can see my lines better. Yeah, oh man, I love the way this brush creates these really organic, kind of angly lines. It's a great inking brush. I'm kind of moving my hand like I watch the squirrels in my backyard, you know, and they just kind of, they don't move fluidly, they move kind of jittery. That's how I'm imagining my hand right now. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Isn't that fun? Let these roots grow wherever they want to grow. Just kind of having a sense of composition and filling in the gaps a little bit. So same thing up here. I just want to create some rough I'm not trying to be super careful. Just imagining. I am following some kind of a logic though, because the branches are bigger toward the trunk, and as they grow out, they get smaller. Because here's a cool thing about trees. Trees actually grow from the inside out. So the outside of a tree, in its bark, is the old crusty layer and the new layer grows up in the inside and pushes everything out, and that's what forms the rings of the tree. Make these a little bit thicker because they're coming more towards us. Yeah, it's kind of cool. And of course out here you get all kinds of little ones. Alright, so now if we turn on our back foliage again, you know, everything's just kind of getting muddy. But now I'm going to start doing some foliage. Go to my recent brush. I'll just stick with that. And this is going to cover up a lot of those branches. Oh man, I gotta get going here. We're running out of time, people. But you know what? It's my live stream. I can go as long as I want. See, what I did was I lightened up my color. So I'm just putting in some random highlights like that. All right, now I do want to show you before I get too far into this, I do want to show you some cool things about creating mandalas. There is a feature, so let me just go right here. I'm going to create a layer above this circle. I'm going to create a clipping mask, so that's going to clip to this layer. Then I'm going to come up here to Canvas and Edit Drawing Guide. I'm going to go to Symmetry, Options, Radial Symmetry, and this is where the magic happens. This is so cool. So I'm going to create an orange, and I think I'm going to stick with my Carumbra. Now check this out. I'm just going to create some random patterns like this, and it copies it in symmetry all the way around. So like if I take this back off, you can see it going all the way around the circle. So I'm just going to do a few of those just to show you because it's really cool. So you go clipping mask, and I think I'll do a deep green for this one, like a really dark green. I'll stick with that Crumbrushian. And for this one, I'm going to just do a pattern. Oops, I gotta turn Drawing Assist on. If I turn on my Drawing Assist, then it will have that symmetry thing going. And here's where you get like the Zentangle idea. You can just create patterns, but it duplicates those patterns all the way around, and it's just so cool. And this is how you can create that mandala thing. Isn't that neat? So let me just do, we'll just keeping it simple. So I'll make this a clipping mask and also put on Drawing Assist. And I think this, since this, I think we'll go into like one of those dark reds to kind of match the, yeah. When I was in Cancun a couple times, I went and toured some of the Mayan ruins and also the Museum of Mayan Art. And it was really neat to just see the patterns that they would create, because the Mayans were really into mandalas. So on this last one, I think I'm going to create a, I'm actually going to use white, almost white. And I think it's going to be like a kind of like a cloudish. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Maybe I'll put a circle. Like that. Yeah, that's fun. So there you go. You get a really simple picture of the mandala. Now let's turn this this back light on. And here's the effect that I was really hoping to get. I'm going to create a layer here. And I'm going to choose yellow, like a really intense yellow, and a really big airbrush. Really big soft airbrush. That's really big. And I want to do this with it. But I want it to be on no, actually I don't. This one's going to be normal, but just at like a light opacity. And I want to really get that light coming through the leaves in the background. So one of the things I'm going to do is actually come up here. I'm going to choose an eraser that has that foliage. I'm going to pop out some of that, so because I want that yellow to pop through like that, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this. It's like if I want that yellow to really pop through there. Come down here and erase that a little bit. Yeah. Because what I want to get from this is like the glow coming from behind the tree, because I think that would be really dramatic and cool. Because sometimes all I'm going for is dramatic and cool. And so if I come above, right above this, and then if I create this as overlay with that airbrush, I can start making like a rim light. On the bottom of the, so since the light's coming from behind the tree, there are going to be spots where it's going to shine through. Like that. And that's really cool. And then just pop it randomly in little spots where maybe the color is, where there's gaps in the canopy. You can see that glowing out. Gonna dap up through there. Yeah, that's looking pretty cool. And again, I'm doing this really fast, so. And then I think I'm just gonna do one more thing and then I'm gonna call it a day. But if I use this feature called Add, I can actually create a really neat glow effect. Like this is where I want the bulk of that to happen. And it will actually, and you'll see in just a second, I'm going to blur this out and it's going to be really cool looking. So let me come up here and do Gaussian blur. Yeah. Well, there you go. It is now noon, and that's what I got for you. Um, there it is. You can kind of see the details. It's kind of a fun little exercise in drawing trees. So, hey, thanks for joining me today. This was super fun. I hope that you learned something about trees. I hope that you enjoyed um, learning about Procreate. And just remember, every week I go live. Next week, I'm going to go live at 7 p.m. in the evening on Thursday because I've got something going on during the day. So I'm Steve Thomason, the art pastor, exploring spirituality and scripture through visual art and creativity. And I do this so that together we can grow deeper in the love of God through Jesus Christ in the power of the Holy Spirit for the sake of the world. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.